Okay, let me.
Dr. Canto, I think we can begin. Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me thank UNCTAD and all the organizing entities for this opportunity to share this side event on productive capacity for a new decade for LDCs. Let me say that the issue of productive capacity for as a central element in the plan of action for the next decade of program of action, the decade of action for the LDCs, is what we have been proposing in the Committee for Development Policy for the past few years. It's quite well recorded in our documents presented to ECOSOC, including in this year's report. Let me say that in fact productive capacity is central for the sustainable development of LDCs. Of course, the central question is how can development partners support LDCs in expanding the productive capacity through domestic policies, including, of course, the efforts to recover from COVID-19. Let me say that this support should probably include the elements of development assistance, but very importantly, some trade actions in terms of access of LDCs to developed country markets and generally to world markets, but also the issue of intellectual property rights, which is a major issue in the transition for LDCs when they graduate. And of course, we look forward to what would be the summit next year, going to agree on this topic and what is the new program of action that will be adopted. Let me say that we have an excellent panel to discuss these issues. I would recommend that the panelists talk for, let's say, 5 to 7 minutes to give time for the questions and probably for a second round of discussions based on what the different panel members have said. Okay, having said this, let me give the floor first to His Excellency Ambassador Perks Clemency de Goya, who is the permanent representative of the Republic of Malawi to the United Nations in New York and chair of the LDC group. As a macroeconomist, Dr. Ligoya has served in various prominent positions during his career, including governor of the Reserve Bank of Malawi and senior economist of the International Monetary Fund. He was also one of the founding members and president of the Economic Association of Malawi and served as chairman of the board for the Malawi Enterprise Development Forum. You have the floor, Ambassador.
Thank you very much, Professor Campo, distinguished panelists, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. This year, the international community is focusing on the development challenges of the least developed countries. The meeting of the preparatory committee of LDC 5 taking place this week is a major step in the process leading to the adoption of the new program of action for the LDCs for the 2022-2031 period. The LDC group needs to make its priorities heard clearly by the international community. And I'm saying this knowingly that it's now 50 years since the creation of this category. And I'm glad that UNCTAD with us here was at that occasion when this group was created and were instrumental in that. At present, the LDCs need not only to recover from the lingering COVID crisis, which their economies are undergoing, but also to strengthen the basis to achieve sustainable development over the medium term. The only process through which this can be achieved is by building, expanding, and upgrading the productive capacities of LDCs in such a way that the process results in the structural transformation of LDC economies. This route is increasingly being recognized by the international community as essential elements of the trajectory towards sustainable development for LDCs. Following this path will make these countries more resilient to future crises, whatever sphere they come from, economic, social, environmental, or health. As I emphasized during a recent webinar at the preparatory meeting on the road to UNCTAD 15 and LDC 5, the LDCs are the group of countries with the lowest level of development of their productive capacities. As shown by UNCTAD's the LDC report 2020, the average productive capacity index of LDCs was 40% below that of other developing countries in 2011 to 2018 period. Due to this only incipient development of productive capacities, the pace of structural transformation of the economies of LDCs is very slow. On average, LDCs still have 56% of their labor force active in agriculture, far ahead of the 30% of other developing countries, and just 3% in developed countries. By contrast, accelerating the development of productive capacities will allow LDCs to achieve superior levels of labor productivity and higher incomes for the population, the diversification of production and exports, building stronger institutions, and enlarging and deepening the tax base and domestic resource mobilization. This is the basis for reaching long-term development goals throughout this decade, whether it is the SDGs or the goals to be included in the next plan of action. The crucial issue is then how LDCs can achieve these goals. Given the limited policy space available to these countries, the LDCs need the assistance of the international community in expanding, building, and upgrading their productive capacities. LDCs and their development partners need to devise a new generation of international support measures. I call them ISMs. These ISMs in the field of trade, finance, technology need to be thoroughly revised and overhauled in order to arrive at a coherent and systematic package that addresses the root cause of the low level of development of LDC productive capacities and leads the structural transformation of LDC economies. This new generation of ISMs should have the following features. First, the ISMs need to be coherent and mutually supportive. They need to be designed in view of a systematic framework that establishes synergies among ISMs in the different fields of trade, finance, technology, and capacity building. Second, ISMs need to be stronger and more effective than the present ISMs, especially in the fields of financing for development and technology. Financing ISMs should favor the wider availability of resources to finance the investments required by structural economic transformation in a way that is ecologically sound and builds environmental resilience. Moreover, these new ISMs need to be strengthened, widened, and deepened through the technological capacities of LDC's economic agents. Third, the new generation of ISMs needs to be adapted to the realities of the 2020s, including the quickening digitization of the world economy, the acceleration of climate change, as well as the lingering effects of the COVID-induced crisis. This policy orientation and the framework for the new generation of ISMs need to be enshrined in the new program of action for LDCs. In order to ensure an effective implementation of the next plan of action for LDCs, it will be crucial to put in place an institutional element that will support the LDCs in the development of their productive capacities in the pursuit of structural transformation. Such institutional support needs to be based on the analysis of the state of productive capacities development in each LDC, building on the productive capacities gap assessment of individual countries. This should be the foundation of in-depth research on development trends in LDCs, encompassing the economic, social, and environmental dimensions. Chair, at the international level, this follow-up needs to examine the operation of international support measures, including the extent to which LDC make use of them, and specifically how effective they are in assisting the structural transformation of LDC economies. It will be essential that the international community expresses its support to the development of LDC productive capacities by extending the support to encompass the strengthening of LDC institutional capacity in policy making for boosting productive capacities. The research and analytical work done by the UN should be complemented by policy analysis and the formulation of guidelines, frameworks, and recommendations. This policy element should be the subject of in-depth policy dialogue between the UN staff and LDC country officials. This policy dialogue and capacity development will strengthen LDC's institutional capacities. Let me finish, Mr. Chairman, by pointing out that the monitoring mechanism, together with policy analysis and evaluation, can help LDCs define the strategies needed to achieve graduation with momentum, boost resilience, and reduce economic, social, environmental, and health vulnerabilities. Graduation from the LDC category is a major development objective of all LDCs, as it indicates that it indicates the point where the development efforts undertaken by these countries obviate the need for special measures of international support. For graduation to be successful and to point the future continued development of these countries, LDCs need to achieve graduation with momentum. This requires long-run preparation so that graduation does not lead to an interrupted or deceleration of the process of sustainable development. I'm very, very happy with the work done by your team, Professor Ocampo, in CDP on graduation, and your work will definitely feed into the LDC 5 process on that subject. I'm extremely delighted to be here, to be invited to speak. And thank you so much, Professor Ocampo and Isabel Duran, and all present at this side event. I thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador, and thanks for your comments on CDP. I think we have been doing quite a good work on this issue of graduation and the criteria and extending the preparatory period. particularly after the pandemic, and of course, a more in-depth review of both of graduating and graduated countries. And let me say that also UNCTAD has been a great support in that process. So having said that, let me give the floor to the second panelist, Ms. Isabel Duran, who is the acting secretary of the UN Conference on Trade and Development and has wide experience in public and intergovernmental affairs and development cooperation. Ms. Duran is a former Vice Prime Minister and Senator of Belgium, as well as Vice President of the European Parliament. In the latter role, she chaired different permanent delegations, such as that of the European Union, African, Caribbean, and Pacific countries following the Cotonou Agreement and other economic partnership agreements. She also served as Minister of Transport and Energy in Belgium for 4 years, overseeing mobility, infrastructure, energy, and sustainable development policies, and was also a member of the Economic Affairs Committee, closely involved in issues such as innovation and the circular economy. You have the floor, Ms. Duran.
Thank you, Professor Campo. You are hearing me well? It's okay? Yes. Perfect.
Yes, we're hearing you very well.
Perfect. So thank you so much, and I'm very happy to be with you today because, as it was really well said by Ambassador Lyoka, it's true that we are in the international community. We are entering in an active and ambitious period with less than 10 years remaining on the 2030 timeline to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. The COVID-19 crisis shook the very foundation of the international system, and we all continue to feel the pandemic's effect in all our countries. Notwithstanding the global loss of lives and livelihoods, the shock has hit the LDCs hard, rolling back their hard-earned progress in poverty reduction and other measures of socioeconomic development. Several events are scheduled to take place in the coming months, which hold critical relevance for LDCs. UNCTAD will hold its 15th quadriennial conference. It will take place in October, virtually, but in Barbados or in virtual Barbados. And soon after, world leaders will meet at the 12th WTO Ministerial Conference. That's also important, end of November, followed by the 5th UN Conference on LDCs in January 2022. These are an invaluable occasion to come together in support the most vulnerable. And we have to combine our action, our declaration, our statement, and our action in order to be consistent and coherent between the different steps in this path. These opportunities must not be missed. The pace and quality of economic transformation in most LDCs have been limited by weak productive capacity despite achieving impressive growth in recent years. This is compounded by a failure to enhance productivity in key sectors, such as technology-intensive manufacturing or services. We have found that the most desirable and equitable form of growth and development is one grounded on the expansion of productive capacities. Because this creates opportunities, it generates employment, enhances technological learning, boosts productivity, and increases household income. All these factors are necessary for achieving sustainable development, and for LDCs, productive capacities play an important part in catching up with more advanced economies. As part of the preparatory process for both UNCTAD 15 and LDC 5, the international community should take time to reflect and learn from past experiences. Since the LDC 4 in 2011 and the adoption of the Istanbul Programme of Action, only 4 countries have graduated. At present, 11 countries are in the graduation pipeline, and looking ahead, all but 3 of the Asian Pacific LDCs are expected to have graduated from category within the next 10 years. This means that the LDC category would largely be composed of African countries. To meet the challenges facing LDCs in a post-COVID reality, we must react together and accordingly. For the next program of action, bold policies and strategies could be crafted to meet the specific needs of these countries towards and beyond graduation. And I agree with what was said about graduation from the CDP. It's true that we have probably to go deeper in the review of the graduation process as such. But building, maintaining, and utilizing productive capacity must be central to this plan. Indeed, given the importance for the future and present of LDCs, productive capacities should form the overarching framework for the next program of action, which has to be decided. All other strategies and related policies should be intertwined within the broad goal. Productive capacity must not only be part of a fragmented collection of sectoral action. This approach characterized the Istanbul Programme of Action, and the outcomes speak for themselves. As I said before, we must be bold when crafting of the new Programme of Action, and we must go beyond the status quo. With the right set of policies and coordinated support from governments, development partners, private sector, civil society, and more than that, what is emerging in the societies, investing in building productive capacity can lead to structural transformation and economic diversification. Moreover, strong productive capacity can spur knock-on effects on employment, inclusive growth, resource efficiency, and environmental sustainability. But we should not stop there. Comprehensive monitoring in the development of new and the strengthening of existing productive capacities is essential. And in this context, I'm pleased to confirm that UNCTAD has developed the Productive Capacities Index. This index has been carefully crafted as a practical and data-driven tool to benchmark the current level of productive capacities and help countries to track progress over time, step by step. Thanks to the breadth and depth of the index across 8 components: human capital, natural capital, energy, transport, ICTs, institution, private sector, and structural change. That's the 8 criteria that we are using in this index, that enable the countries to assess where they are performing well, where they are performing not so well, and identify areas where they are lag behind. Furthermore, through a productive capacity gap assessment, UNCTAD provides technical cooperation for countries to leverage the PCI in assessing their own productive capacity gaps and identifying the national strategy to close these gaps. In closing, please allow me to emphasize that UNCTAD is committed to being a key partner for LDCs, including in the negotiation of the Programme of Action text that will be adopted next January in Doha. And I would really rebound on what said Ambassador Ligoya, what you mentioned on the necessity to have a new international support measure, because it has to be adapted to the 21st century or the next decade, and adopted with a holistic approach, addressing the biggest challenges, which is, of course, digitalization, climate change, and things which are all important for all of us, and especially for the LDCs. So I agree on that, and we will continue to work in order to call for this kind of new international support measure. UNCTAD's LDC-focused research and analysis on financing for productive capacity building. We will also continue on investment on ODA and the role of e-commerce through our e-trade readiness assessment, among other topics, is at your disposal. UNCTAD remains ready to share our expertise and build on our long history of support to the LDCs and vulnerable economies. So we look forward to continue close engagement in the preparatory process for UNCTAD 15 on one hand and LDC 5 on the other hand. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Duran. Let me also underscore, as you have done this gap analysis that UNCTAD does, which is an essential instrument, but also many of the other recommendations that you have provided in your presentation, which certainly should enter into the discussion of this topic going into LDC 5. Now, having said that, let me give the floor to our third speaker, Mr. Radnakar Adhikari. So, sorry if I mispronounced names, but I guess that's a problem of our age. He's
No,
the
it's not
executive
only a question of your age. No.
It was all right.
It
was perfect. It was perfect.
Okay, Executive Director of the Enhanced Integrated Framework, Executive Secretariat. He has serving in that character since 2013. Prior to this, he was the Chief Executive Director of the South Asia Watch on Trade, Economics, and Environment, a Kathmandu-based regional think tank. He has also served, among other roles, as Senior Advisor to the National Planning Commission of the Government of Nepal. Dr. Adhikari has conducted extensive research and published in the areas of international trade, regional economic integration, aid for trade, competition policy, and intellectual property rights, particularly from the perspective of LDCs. You have the floor, Mr. Adhikari.
Thank you, Professor Ocampo, for your generous introduction. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Fellow panelists, excellencies, distinguished participants. I would like to respond to the first question we are trying to address during this event among the 5 or 6 questions that were outlined. And this actually relates to basically the building back better and productive capacity financing. With the launch of Productive Capacity Index last year, UNCTAD has managed to shine a spotlight on the issue. This is, of course, a benchmarking exercise, as Isabel just mentioned. I think this will hopefully motivate countries not only to mainstream productive capacity building into their national development agenda, but also allocate resources to implement prioritized action. In light of this, I would like to make 3 points. The first point that I'm trying to make is that there are opportunities for LDCs to build back better. For this, sustainable productive capacity building agenda should be included in the LDC's recovery plan post-COVID-19. And this is even more important for graduating countries which need to strengthen their productive capacity to enhance their competitiveness in the international market. In the present context, 3 areas within the domain of the Productive Capacity Index are particularly important for LDCs. First, the institutional dimension is important for improving the overall business climate, facilitating trade and investment, and reducing trade costs. Because of its cross-cutting nature, it affects all other dimensions of Productive Capacity Index. Second, strengthening the health system, which has either been neglected, is an important part of human capital development. However, education and skill development are equally critical. Third, increasing investment in technology, in particular digital technology, both to enhance competitiveness and to move up the value chain ladder, would be key to both productive capacity building as well as building a resilient economic foundation. This aspect has gained a heightened significance in light of COVID-19, where e-commerce is gaining prominence, with e-commerce retail sales posting 25% growth in 2020, 10% higher than the business as usual projections. LDCs such as Cambodia, the Gambia, Rwanda, Senegal, and many other LDCs are exploiting the potential of e-commerce with the support of development partners, including UNCTAD and the EIF. The second point that I would like to make is that financing is the hardest bit. Although LDCs have made some progress in last 2 decades on mobilizing domestic resources, their external resources gap increased from 13.8% to 15.6% of GDP in the recent period, according to UNCTAD LDC Report 2020, which underscores the need to mobilize external resources for financing productive capacity. LDCs without the capacity to mobilize other sources of external finance often turn to debt as a relatively convenient instrument, which led to a rise of external debt in the LDCs even prior to COVID-19 pandemic. COVID-19 crisis is now exacerbating concerns over the ability of these countries to meet their debt repayment obligation, with one LDC having already defaulted on their external debt. Remittances too have been an important source of financing for a number of LDCs. However, they too have declined by 1.6% in 2020, although not as sharply as initially predicted. Many LDCs have also relied on official development assistance, including aid for trade, to finance their productive capacity. Official development assistance from members of OECD Development Assistance Committee rose to an all-time high of $161 billion in 2020, up 3.5% in real terms from 2019. However, how much of that went to building productive capacity is not yet clear. Aid for trade to less developed countries has grown annually since 2006, reaching $16.6 billion in 2019. The effects of the pandemic on this pre-crisis trajectory remains to be seen. Considering the prevailing market and financial context, additional foreign direct investment will be critical. However, indications from recent UNCTAD figures are not positive, as FDI to LDCs have already declined in initial period of 2020, although there are few opportunities worth exploring. Therefore, identifying innovative, sustainable source of funding would be critical for the recovery. This includes various modalities such as public-private partnership, blended finance, and impact investment. And this brings me to the third point, which is the fact that partnership is the key. While LDCs need to be in the driving seat, the post-COVID-19 productive capacity building agenda cannot be managed by LDC governments alone. At the national level, they need to partner with their private sector and civil society. At the regional level, they need to partner with the regional trade bodies and regional development bank. The EIF is, for example, partnering with the AFCFTA Secretariat and the International Islamic Trade Finance Corporation to help countries to take advantage of regional trade opportunities, which can eventually help in productive capacity building. At the global level, they need to work hand in hand with development partners, international financial institutions, and foreign investors, among others. And this also applies to international organizations. The EIF, for example, has invested about 70% of its resources to productive capacity building. However, through partnership, it has been able to leverage additional resources. Two examples are worth highlighting here. One, the EIF partnership with the government of Vanuatu, the recently graduated countries, in December 2020, and New Zealand, that helped mobilize $19 million for the reconstruction of Port Vila seafront, is an example worth highlighting. The second example is the EIF partnership with the UNDP and government of Cambodia helped mobilize $150 million in impact investment to help create infrastructure for cassava value chain, which is an important component of building productive capacity. All these avenues need to be explored now more than ever. So with these words, I would like to thank you for your kind attention. Would be happy to respond to any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karim, for your very important comments. Let me perhaps emphasize the issue of financing and debt, as that you mentioned as some of the crucial issues which are being discussed now because of that. But my view in global debates is that the support in this area that has been approved by the G20 is clearly insufficient. And of course, the financing needs, including those for infrastructure, which are essential for as an essential complement for developing productive capacities, is of course a major issue for LDCs going forward. Okay, thank you. And let me now give the floor to Mr. Tafeletes Tafashum, who is actually one of our members of the Committee for Development Policy, and actually in charge of the policy subgroup on LDCs. He's a principal advisor to the Ethiopian Investment Commission. Tess, as we call him, previously served as Director of Organization for Africa, developed countries and special programs. In that role, he coordinated the contributions of UNCTAD to nearly developing countries and led a team of economists for 2 annual reports, including the Least Developed Countries Report. He has extensive national and international experience on trade and development, investment, industrial policy, technology, enterprise development, and regional integration. You have the floor, Des.
Thank you very much. You can hear me, yes? Thank you very much, Jose Antonio.
Yes.
Let me first thank the organizers for the kind invitation and for giving me the opportunity to participate in this event, which is taking place during the first session of the PrepCom for the 5th UN Conference on LDCs. Now, the LDC conference provides the opportunity to review progress in the implementation of program of action for the previous decade, assess what has been achieved and what remain unfulfilled goals, learn from experience, and adjust policies and strategies to ensure that the next program of action is more focused, forward-looking, and incorporates new and emerging issues. Unlike the past conference, however, the next one will take place at a critical juncture, as Ambassador was saying, in LDC's 50 years of history, and at a time when the international community is struggling to cope with global pandemics that has shaken the health sectors and economies of all countries to the core. This is also a make or break decade for meeting the 2030 agenda and the ambitious vision of achieving all goals while leaving no one behind. Now, these are the realities that will shape the backdrop to the outcome of the next LDC conference, along with the need to ensure that the role of the new technologies in LDC's development trajectory is placed as a center of their national development agenda. For my brief intervention today, I will focus on 3 interrelated issues that, in my opinion, deserve serious consideration, both during the preparatory process and as a conference itself. This is not, of course, an exhaustive list, but unfortunately, the time I have does not allow me to go beyond the following 3 interrelated issues. The first involves the lessons learned from recent experience with graduation. Learning from past experience, including from one's own failures, is an important component of effective policymaking process. The primary goal and desire of every LDC is to graduate from LDC category, thus signifying economic and social progress. In this respect, it's encouraging to see a growing number of LDCs meeting the criteria for graduation since Istanbul after 4 decades of slow progress. There are now 16 countries that are either in the process of graduating or have met the criteria for graduation for the first time. Now, this is definitely good news. Along with this encouraging trend, however, a new phenomena has emerged, which is disconcerting and requires urgent attention and decision at the forthcoming LDC conference. I'm talking, of course, about the concerns and anxiety that are increasingly being expressed by graduating countries about losing international support measures and the fear that they will face challenges as they transit into post-graduation development trajectory. Graduation should be a time for celebration, not apprehension and hesitation about the future and about graduating. When the General Assembly first established LDC category 50 years ago, the ultimate objective envisaged at that time was to see one day a world without LDCs. This was a novel objective then and continues to be today. However, if urgent measures are not taken to assist graduating and graduated countries, including through new and targeted support measures, we are likely to see some of them still struggling to leave the category by the end of this decade, or even worse, undergoing a reversal of progress achieved. The fourth LDC conference in Istanbul was important in giving impetus to the graduation agenda by providing a target on graduation. The fifth conference should take this proactive approach forward by proposing concrete support measures to provide graduating and graduated countries the last push they need for soft landing as non-LDC developing countries. Now, this takes me to my second and related point, which is the current mechanism for smooth transition. You recall that the Istanbul conference requested the UN Secretary General to establish an ad hoc working group on smooth transition and explore ways in which smooth transition from LDC category could be operationalized and strengthened. This led to the GA resolution inviting development partners to clarify in a predictable manner their position with regard to the extension of support measures for graduation. To date, only EU and the EIF have offered a more predictable proposition for smooth transition. To cut a long story short, despite the GA resolution, the smooth transition mechanism still lacks predictability, transparency, and the focus that it requires to give confidence to graduating countries. In my opinion, there is a fundamental flaw in the way the smooth transition mechanism was conceived from the beginning, which was understood in terms of supporting graduating countries by simply extending for a short grace period the same LDC-specific international support measures after graduation. The alternative would have been to see smooth transition as a country-focused support process to prepare graduating countries for challenges ahead and support them in their quest to succeed as middle-income economies and avoid the middle-income trap. We have observed, for example, that more and more LDCs are reaching graduation point without utilizing some of the important international support measures provided. For example, the duty-free, quota-free market access and the special waiver offered by WTO. This is not because the support measures are unnecessary or irrelevant to LDC needs, but because not all LDCs have developed the productive capacities necessary to produce goods that could benefit from market access opportunities. In this situation, a smooth transition arrangement that simply extends for a few years the same international support measures to countries which have no capacity to utilize the support measures does not make sense. Indeed, it's more effective and helpful to identify targeted support measures that will help graduating countries to build on the momentum that enables them to meet the criteria for graduation and continue to develop as they leave the LDC category. I understand the UNCTAD Secretariat is currently working on this issue with a view to proposing a more realistic, pragmatic, predictable, and workable mechanism for smooth transition and the strategy needed to enable graduating countries achieve what UNCTAD calls graduation with momentum. This is timely, in my opinion, and I hope UNCTAD's proposal will be given due consideration in the course of the preparations for the next LDC conference. I believe the intention is to link the smooth transition mechanism with the development of productive capacities, both during the preparatory process for graduation and as countries build their capabilities after graduation. In fact, my third and last point is related to the development of productive capacities and their continuing importance as drivers and engines of growth and structural transformation, including in the era when adapting frontier technology have become a necessity for sustainable development. Unfortunately, I do not have the time to elaborate and the multidimensional role of product capacities. But as a member of CDP and following my chairman, was Antonio, I will be failing my responsibility if I do not remind participants to this side event. The recommendation by CDP is that the LDC adopt expanding productive capacity for sustainable development as a framework for organizing the program of action for LDC for the decade 2021-2030. The CDP believes that this will enable LDCs to design an integrated, coherent, synergetic program of action instead of listing many priority areas and policy actions that are difficult to monitor. I understand some member states have doubts and are concerned that using product capacity as a framework may exclude other important issues that need to be incorporated into the program of action. However, looking closely at the definition of product capacity, it is difficult to imagine any important issue being excluded, including emerging areas such as digital transformation, climate change, recovery from COVID-19 shock, and so on. In conclusion, these are difficult times for LDCs and the rest of the world. No one foresaw the COVID-19 pandemic and its unpredictable implications, and no country was prepared for it. Such a scenario often provides an opportunity for rethinking or thinking out of the box in finding lasting solutions. In preparing for the next UN LDC conference, I hope the LDCs are looking back to learn from past experience while identifying bold and realistic policy measures to pave the way forward. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Tess, and thanks actually for stating so well the analysis that we have been doing this year in CDP. And restating, of course, our recommendation, which has been actually made several years, that the building productive capacity for sustainable development should be the core mandate or the core agreement for in LDC 5. Now, let me give.
Professor, I'm afraid you're muted.
You are muted, Prof.
I don't know who muted me. Not me, certainly. But anyway, thank you very much. I was going to recommend to participants who want to ask questions to put them in the chat, so I can read them to the panel members. And give me finally the floor to Mr. Moshe Kao, who is the program manager officer at the UN Technology Bank for the least developed countries, and is speaking on behalf of the Technology Bank's managing director, Mr. Joshua Setipa. Mr. Kao is an experienced professional in the areas of trade policy and international development. Among other roles, he served as the permanent representative of Lesotho to the United Nations Office and UN specialized agencies in Geneva. He has also provided advisory services in Geneva for the African, Caribbean, and Pacific Group on development issues, coordinated the African Group, and monitored development on LDC-related issues within the World Trade Organization. You have the floor, Mr. Kao.
Thank you very much, Professor Ocampo. It is a pleasure for me to make this contribution to the side event on building on productive capacities for the new decade on behalf of the Managing Director for the Technology Bank for Least Developed Countries. As has been mentioned by the various speakers, LDCs are at a crucial point, not only in responding to COVID-19, but towards graduation and achieving the SDGs. They are only left with the 9 years. My intervention would focus on linking science, technology, and innovation, which form a component of building productive capacities. Moderator, as has been mentioned, Science, technology, and innovation are an enablers for achieving sustainable development goals. And in the side event, or in the theme of yesterday, it was also re-emphasized. Chair, the COVID-19 has highlighted quite a number of deficiencies in the global order, including highlighting the glaring levels of inequality, especially in the LDCs. But it has also highlighted the importance of prioritizing science and technology and innovation from policy formulation, allocation of resources to international cooperation and partnerships, as was mentioned earlier by the Executive Director of EIF. Now, reflecting on some of the contributions of STI during COVID-19, it has been clear that there is need for the LDCs to strategically increase investment in research and development. Building productive capacities and using the Productive Capacities Index will allow for the statistical analysis, benchmarking, and assessment of existing gaps within and across the countries and regions based on the 8 components that Madam Durant also outlined earlier on. I'm raising this because the Technology Bank also uses a mechanism called the Technology Needs Assessment, which assesses the science, technology, and innovation for socio-economic transformation and sustainable development. The TNAs also identify gaps and priority needs as a first step towards developing coherent and integrated strategies that are tailored to the specific situation of the country under review. The TNAs and the productive capacity gap assessments are complementary, and as was mentioned, it is important for partnership. Perhaps, Chair, while other speakers have focused primarily on the overall graduation of the LDCs, if I could just highlight a few items that are directly related to science, technology, and innovation that can support the LDCs. I would start firstly with technology transfer. It is important to facilitate technology transfer to stimulate adoption and diffusion of the technologies that will enable LDCs to leapfrog previous technological paradigms and transform their economies in the new decade. As technologies are in the hands of the private sector, strong engagement with the private sector is critical to the success of technology transfer. And as was mentioned earlier on, it is important to build that partnership at national, regional, and at global level. Moderator, also there is a current discussion linked with the technology transfer on the WTO TRIPS waiver that will secure the rapid access to vaccines and other medical products needed to combat COVID-19. It is important to note that this is an important step for the LDCs. However, many of the LDCs, as was mentioned earlier on, still need to address many of their limited capacities, and productive capacities could be a solution for their long-term solution towards accelerating the realization of a more inclusive and sustainable agenda. The second point that I wanted to touch on is on bridging the digital divide. Closing the digital divide and promoting connectivity in the LDCs are essential contributors to building resilience for the LDCs to join other countries in advancing their economies and benefiting from rapid expansions that digital technologies offer. As was recently mentioned, frontier technologies and other digital technologies have become the way for many countries to succeed, especially in light of the challenges that have been brought about by COVID-19. Therefore, access to affordable broadband internet and complemented by enhanced digital skills will ignite innovation and generate entrepreneurs and startups to create the needed jobs to improve growth aspects, as well as ensuring as well as ensuring that the policies and the regulatory frameworks are also in place. The bank also supports the implementation of the 8 key areas of action in the Secretary General's roadmap on digital cooperation. Another component that I will not delve a lot on it is on capacity development, which has been mentioned by the previous speakers, the importance of ensuring that the LDCs build their capacity. On financing, there has been a large and persistent gap between the support needed and the support provided in terms of finance, technology, and capacity building. As Ambassador Lugoya also indicated, there is urgent need that is required by LDCs to mobilize domestic resources as well as external finance from development partners to provide financing that will enable them to graduate. Chair, as you would know, science, technology, and innovation is cross-cutting, and there is need to promote coordination, coherence, and cooperation amongst the different stakeholders in the various sectors at national, regional, and global level to enhance synergies and efficiencies. In incorporating the role of the Academies of Sciences can also provide scientific advice and evidence-based advice to governments that can integrate productive capacities into national development plans. Lastly, Chair, how can the conference contribute to expanding capacities of LDCs? The conference should have an ambitious outcome that will make up for the lost gains due to COVID-19, build back better towards the achievement of SDGs. Chair, I think as Tess had indicated, it should be precise, and we need to rethink out of the box on realistic policies, which we also concur to. And therefore, LDCs cannot use the past methods nor approaches to development. They have to structurally transform their economies by building productive capacities, leveraging science, technology, and innovation, and importantly, developing digital skills and enhancing institutional capacities for policy formulation and regulation. Lastly, graduation with momentum is indeed the ultimate goal for the many LDCs. I thank you for your attention, and I will await questions during the interactive discussion. Over to you, moderator.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cao. I mean, you have, of course, raised the issue of technology, which is the area where you work, and the immense challenges associated with technology, which had already been mentioned by some of the previous speakers. Let me say that I think we have heard quite a good agenda of the issues that have to be taken into account in putting development of productive capacity of LDCs at the center of the LDC 5 conference, and of course the plan of action for the next decade, which also coincides with the achievement of the SDGs. So it's a particularly critical area. Now, I don't see any questions or comments from participants. So let me suggest that we have a second round in which the speakers can make some short comments on basically on the issues that were raised by other speakers, which should be incorporated in the agenda of the next conference. So let me first of all give the floor to Ambassador Berks.
Thank you, Prof. And I want to thank all the panelists for their contributions. And, it strikes me that 50 years, as I said earlier on, since the creation of the LDC group, we see now that the statistics are going the wrong way. We have more poor people now. We have more hungry people now. And inequalities have increased. I'm asking myself how we have to get to 2030 with the confidence that we need. And I like the idea of productive capacities and all the work done so far, because it brings out that element that maybe was not stressed as much in all our previous work, and that's a structural transformation. That's what we need. And for that to happen, by the way, for it to happen, it is very essential because we have to move from the aid dependency that some of our countries still have to productive capacities by increasing the value addition and even other sectors where our minerals, for example, from Africa are exported raw or not well processed. These are areas that we need very, very serious dialogue on. And I'm very happy that Ratnakar has given examples of the work they are doing in LDCs and even countries that have just graduated. It is sad that from the Istanbul program of action, where we thought half of our countries in LDCs would graduate, and that we end up with so few countries that have graduated. This is food for thought, and I sincerely hope that we will not go back to repeat the same mistakes that led us not to achieve the goals that we had set for ourselves. In actual fact, we don't have 10 years, we have just 9 years to 2030. What is it that we can do within those 9 years? And this is why I said we are living in a very, very crucial time that will define the future of this world. And the paradigm in our SDG, we say, leave no one behind. It is very apparent to me and to everybody that we are being left behind as LDCs. And we need, first of all, to recover from the pandemic and then think of how we aspire to achieve the 2030 agenda. And it was said here that within the 9-10 years, probably we will end up with just African countries in the LDC category. Need, therefore, for the international support measures. From Europe, in the LDC, was it LDC 3? We ended up with everything but arms, which is good, is helping our countries. In Istanbul, we ended up with the technology bank, which is very promising, but needs more support. We should think of what we will end up with. And that's why the call for new international support measures is very crucial. So we are lucky that we have SDP, we have the whole DESA, we have UNCDF, and all the other, UNDP, UNCDF, all the other, WTO. We have the brains. Let's not be shy over issues that may make somebody angry, but let's call a spade and move on. The need for innovative financing is crucial. And I'm glad that UNCDF is working very hard on that. You know, the joint SDG fund, for example, if that was to be utilized as is intended, it is going to help a lot of our countries. Malawi is already a beneficiary, and from an injection of $9 million, we have leveraged, we are going to leverage up to $38 million in innovative financing. So the issue of debt, for example, can we come to an understanding that if we don't resolve this, we should not think of the possibility of LDCs to achieve the 2030 agenda? So my call is for all partners to join us in this journey to Doha 22, and for our cooperating partners to know that we are not asking just for charity. This is an obligation that we all took when we were coming up with the SDGs, that we will leave no one behind. So let's do it. And I welcome all contributions from everybody. Professor Ocampo, thank you so much for your work and the work of the CDP and the whole DESA in this journey to Doha 22. I thank you.
No, thank you very much, Ambassador. I actually, we actually got a question, actually quite a nice question from Dange. I want to read for the other speakers and to also refer to this. It says in the Istanbul Program of Action, the phrase productive capacity is mentioned frequently, but there are very few binding commitments or specific practical recommendations aimed at realizing this goal on the ground. Do you expect to see possibilities for a more specific, actionable stance towards productive capacities in the next program of action? If so, how? So let me now give the floor for a second comment to Ms. Duran. Is she out?
I think
By any chance?
Professor Campo, I think we've lost Madame Duran.
Okay, very good. So let's continue then with Mr. Adhikari.
Thank you, Professor. Can you hear me? Can everybody hear me? We lost Professor Ocampo. Okay, all right. So
no,
yeah, thank you
okay.
thank you very much for providing this opportunity. Just three quick points, and the first two are related. When Ambassador Park mentioned that the fact that aid dependence must be reduced, of course, this is one of the things that we should try target in the long run anyway, and particularly for the graduating countries, I think aid will eventually reduce. We can see that the share of loan is increasing, and the aid, particularly in grant form, is going to reduce anyway. But then what is important is when it comes to graduation, we have to be able to incentivize graduation. This is something that we have been advocating almost for 8 years, and we as EIF are proud to be the in a way the market leader, if you wish, in this field by providing predictable support for a period of 5 years. And others have actually followed suit, including the UN Technology Bank and UN OHRL has led the investment promotion investment support initiative implemented by IDLO. So that's the first point that I wanted to make. And in terms of incentivizing graduation, just one quick addition is that see, I was very pleased to see that CDP floating this idea of sustainable graduation support fund or facility, something that I heard for the first time this afternoon while participating in the graduation side event this morning. And my friend Tess made a very good presentation there. So one of the things that we could propose, to address Dan's question, is to really have productive capacity as the overarching sort of goal within the sustainable graduation support fund or facility, whatever. So that could be one of the possibility through which we could have more tangible results within the proposed Doha program of action. But what is even more important is that, of course, even if there are targets and indicator, they are not going to be enough. There has to be a proper monitoring mechanism in place and milestone that are in a way binding. I mean, of course, international agreements such as like this, anyway are soft laws, and they would not be binding. But the inbuilt element of monitoring and evaluation would add to that predictability and assurance. So that's the point relating to aid and incentivizing graduation. The other example, thank you, Ambassador Park, for appreciating the kind of support that we have been providing to LDC. There is several examples that I wanted to share, but due to lack of time, I could not. There's one important example that I wanted to share, if Professor Ocampo allows me to do so.
Yes, go ahead.
Professor Ocampo. Okay, so what happened was that this week itself, and this is very much related to productive capacity building. So on Monday, I participated in an event together with the Ministry of Commerce and Bangladesh Garment Manufacturers and Exporters Association as a part of the EIF support, and which is actually overall objective is to build the high-end garment facility in Bangladesh, because Bangladesh, as many of us know, has, is the second largest exporter of garment, but bulk of the exports that their export basket comprises of are low-end product or mid-end product. So in order to move up the value chain ladder, we thought that building productive capacity would be absolutely critical. So therefore, we partner with this private sector association, sectoral association, to create what is known as Innovation and Efficiency Center. And this will be created at the BGMEA, Bangladesh Garment Manufacturer and Export Association's office in Dhaka. And EIF has provided very limited amount of money, 450,000 or something dollar. And the BGMEA will match that contribution both through cash and kind. And with that kind of a support measures in place, they will be able to build their productive capacity and will be in a position to start exporting high-end garments in foreseeable future. This is the plan, and which would actually help them to sort of cater to the market that does not require preferential market access that is currently available after their graduation. So these are the type of actionable sort of examples that we should document and share and provide support to LDCs to adapt post-graduation and clearly productive capacity building agenda. This is no overstatement to say that the major focus will have to be on productive capacity building agenda. Thank you.
Well, thank you very, very much. And of course, we totally agree that this issue should be the central issue in the next program of action. Having said that, let me now give the floor to Tess for his final comments.
Thank you, Jose Antonio. Let me focus on this excellent question asked by Dan, and to build on what Ratnaka was saying. Dan was asking, do speakers see possibilities for more specific actionable stance towards product capacity in the next program of action? Well, that's precisely what the CDP has been recommending, first of all, that product capacity should be used as a framework, and I'll explain in a minute very briefly why. But I think going back to the Istanbul Program of Action, the problem then was that the problem was not that LDC did not recognize the importance or critical role of product capacities. They do. In fact, as you say, it's really mentioned in the text everywhere. But it's presented as if product capacity is different from other priority areas. The priority areas identified include product capacity at the top, and then infrastructure is identified as if it's separate from product capacity. Trade is identified, and education and human resource development, other areas identified as if they are separate priorities. I think this is where I think, with all due respect, the member states really miss the point, or perhaps the term product capacity is not appreciated. Product capacity, the way it was developed in the 2006 report by UNCTAD, LDC report, that report focused on product capacity, but it's not something that UNCTAD started. I mean, Jose Antonio, other scholars have been working about production capability for many years. Is in a way, that came about in an attempt to understand what is development about. How do countries develop? What should they do to develop? So product capacity is a term used to define all the diverse competencies, skills, capabilities, technology or otherwise, infrastructure, institutions, financial, human, other capabilities that countries need, that so that collectively they are able to start producing a diverse range of products and services and do innovation and adaptation, and that will give them the opportunity to get out of reliance on commodities and produce products that they can sell competitively international market. It's really product capacity is a definition of what countries need to do if they want to move up the value chain, if they want to develop. Now, that is how I think member states should understand it. And that's why CDP is saying that use it as a framework, which means to me, what it means is that the program of action would identify infrastructure, not for the sake of developing infrastructure, but infrastructure to develop the product capacity. Education, you spend investment so that you could have better product capacity. The health sector has to improve because they have healthy people and healthy workers to contribute to product capacity. So that way, the product capacity gives focus. That's what I think the CDP meant when it says that use product capacity as a framework. It does not mean that other areas should not be included. In fact, from digitalization and fighting climate change, even meeting the SDGs, from goal 1 to all the way to goal 17, including of course, goal 8 and 9, all based at the end of the day on building product capacity. If countries continue to build product capacity, they recover better. For example, the current crisis, the difference between countries that are like the South Koreas and the Chinas of this world and Zambia and Malawi, if you compare Zambia and Malawi, their recovery is going to depend on two things. In the cases of Zambia, with copper prices improving, in the case of Angola, with oil prices improving. But these other countries can sell different products. If certain products is not selling, they start to invent other products because they have the capability, the skill, and the market and the financial and other competencies that they need to start producing goods they can sell, services they can sell. So to answer Dan's question, I think in my view, what the next program of action should do is it should use building product capacity as a framework to identify all these other priorities, including new issues like digitalization, as a way of building this country's productive capacity. And two benefits there. One, luckily now we have this productive capacity index, which means that we can monitor regularly how countries are doing, how they are performing. And secondly, gaps can be assessed. And some countries' gaps could be dealt with by identifying targeted policies. So it even helps for monitoring the program of action, because countries will be measuring in terms of how they are doing building their product capacity as recommended through the program of action, and which makes it easier to monitor. So I think the answer to your question, or partial answer anyway, is to ensure that all the other areas, including the program of action, are somehow framed in the context of building productive capacity. The IPOA has, I think, 147 action lines, policy actions recommended. It's really difficult to monitor, and I think it was done because so many issues were raised, and to keep everyone happy, you include all policy actions, and nobody knows who's doing what. I think it's much better to give it a focus through product capacity. That's how I see it. Thanks, Jose Antonio.
Thanks to very much, Tess. Let me finally give the floor to Mr. Cao.
Thank you very much, Professor. I will not take too much because I think all has been mentioned, but I wanted to really focus on the dense point, particularly where point to also complement what the previous speaker just indicated. I think what had been missing was framework, using productive capacities as a framework. It was seen as one of the many, but I think we view it also as being by using productive capacities framework, it will provide an opportunity for a coordinated, synergized and integrated approach to development. And therefore, we will all work towards that direction. And in so doing, will facilitate the structural transformation that Ambassador also mentioned, make us move away from aid dependency. But as has been seen in the recent years, digital transformation is also one key element already within, but it is an underlying requisite for many sectors for them to be able to add value to their products, so that they can also transition away from single products into diversified economies. And last but not least, I think a pragmatic outcome, as was mentioned, could be really focusing, bringing on board their productive capacities framework that can help LDCs to respond to COVID-19 as well as build back better for post-COVID and beyond graduation. Thank you, Chair.
Well, thank you very much to all these participants. This was a really excellent panel. I really look forward to the summary of the recommendations by the organizers, because I think there is many issues associated to the issue of productive capacity that have been mentioned today. In many areas, domestic policy, in different area of finance, of technology, and of course the parallel process of graduation of LDCs and how to manage it, which of course has been at the center of our work here in CDP, and of course to looking forward to the decisions and the proposals that are going to be presented by to LDC 5. So Ambassador Nigoya, we look forward to very much to what you're and the whole team that you lead will recommend to, well, actually the whole group of countries that you lead would recommend to the conference. So having said that, let me say goodbye and thank to all the participants for this excellent panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Jose
you.
Antonio.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very good. Nice to see you, Tessa.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Nice to see
Thank
all
you.
the others,
Bye.
Matthias.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Hi, Steph. Hello.